Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. Also breaking tonight, Covington Catholic High School graduate Nicholas Sandmann announced he has settled with the Washington Post in a defamation suit stemming from their botched coverage of his interaction with a Native American elder last year that falsely portrayed him as the aggressor. If you recall, media outlets smeared the teenager and misreported what actually happened. Now, following the news, Sandmann tweeted, "We have settled with Washington Post and CNN. The fight isn't over. 2 down, 6 to go." So ask yourself, how far will the media, Joe Biden supporters, and the radical Democrats go to try and smear the president and his allies? Censorship, cancel culture, and intimidation are all now part of the Democratic playbook. Just look at this new poll from the Cato Institute, finding that 62% of Americans say they have political views they're afraid to share. Now, yesterday, the president sat down with Barstool Sports' Dave Portnoy and discussed these deeply polarized items. Take a look.
Half the country hates the other half, and no matter what you say, you can't get along. So, and you're the lightning rod. There's no doubt about that. In my mind, do you agree with that? That you're like a lightning rod?
Sometimes for a purpose. I mean, but...
How do we bring it together so the two sides right now that are heads can be like, you're my guy?
I think it was happening, and then we got hit by the China virus. Our country never did better. The best employment numbers in the history of our country, best unemployment numbers, African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, everybody, best unemployment numbers in history, best stock market we've ever had. But success does it, and we were ready to do it.
Joining me now for reaction, Fox News legal analyst Gregg Jarrett, along with media reporter for The Hill, Joe Concha, and Relatable podcast host Allie, Beth Stuckey. Thank you so much for joining us. Gregg, I want to start with you because the Washington Post really did need to settle this. They overstepped their bounds with Nicholas Sandmann. It wasn't a coincidence that on his 18th birthday he signed this agreement. And boy, I would love to know how much he got.
Yeah, I would imagine tens of millions of dollars. But it underscores how the liberal mainstream media feels empowered to smear and defame anybody they perceive to be either conservative or pro-Trump. And Nicholas Sandmann was the prime target for this. His only crime was wearing a MAGA hat, so he must be, therefore, villainized and demonized, and that's what they did. They accused him of racism, provoking a confrontation, when in fact the opposite was true. Videotape evidence showed it. He was the victim of harassment and racial slurs. But the media doesn't care about facts and truth and evidence. They are willing to abandon all objectivity, suspend their sense of fairness, because they are driven by this maniacal hatred of Trump. And so anything that might damage him is justified to the mainstream media, even if it destroys a young man. And we certainly saw so much of this narrative driven by the media that was false in the Russia collusion case, in which they persistently, for 3 long years, told Americans that Trump was a Russian agent who colluded with Moscow in the bowels of the Kremlin. And of course, they ignored all the compelling evidence to the contrary. So this is media malpractice on steroids. It will not change. Throwing money at a problem is the easy way out. They will never apologize for their wrongful practices, and it's no wonder that Americans no longer trust journalism.
No, I think he was right to sue and evidently to settle. And, this is not a one-off situation. It happens regularly. Now, Allie, Beth, I want to talk to you about that Cato Institute poll, because that was fascinating. Nearly 2 in 3 Americans saying that they feel intimidated based on what they would be willing to say because of the political backlash.
Right. We have seen people fired simply for saying that Trump is the president of the United States. There was a baseball coach just the other day who got fired literally for tweeting that President Trump is the president of the United States. You've got people who have gotten fired for disagreeing with Black Lives Matter. And so, of course, people are scared to speak up. They're thinking about providing for themselves, providing for their families, their livelihoods, in some cases, their lives. And so they're not going to want to be outspoken about their support for President Trump or for saying that they're a conservative. Now, the interesting thing is, what is that going to mean for November? So as we did in 2016, we thought that we saw a lot of anti-Trump energy that would lead to Hillary Clinton winning. Well, there seems to be a lot of energy out in the streets right now against President Trump and against conservatism, against law and order, that I think some Democrats are thinking that that's going to bode well for Joe Biden. The fact of the matter is, we just don't know. There's so many people who are intimidated into silence that it's really hard to tell who really is out there supporting President Trump implicitly and silently. So unfortunately, we're unable to boldly come out and to say our political views and to have the debate and the dialogue that would be so productive and so good for this country. And so some people just kind of, they feel like they have to hide away in their homes and not really talk about their views for the good of their family. But we'll see. We'll see what happens in the ballot box in November.
It is a sad day because people should be able to speak their mind, and we as a nation should be able to have that discussion. But I found it interesting in that poll, only staunch liberals felt comfortable enough to share their opinions out loud. And I think that's going to show up in the polling and why the polling is going to be off yet again. Joe, though, I want to go and talk about Joe Biden. He's hiding there in his basement. Really taking these softball interviews. President day after day is taking hard interviews, and he's able to sit down with Barstool Sports and talk to a whole audience that normally isn't necessarily watching, although they should be watching this program, and he's able to do some things that Joe Biden's not able to do.
Well, for instance, sit down and actually do interviews, right? And Joe Biden hasn't had a press conference, Jason, in over 100 days. And even the press conference that he had about a week or two ago, he took questions from exactly 6 reporters. So, look, the president's base is still very much with him. You see approval numbers within the GOP in the 90% range. He doesn't have to worry about that too much. But what he has to do is shore up the type of people that voted for him in 2016. Because remember, the difference was in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, not so much bringing people from the other side, but people who actually never voted before. So he is now reaching out to people that maybe aren't paying attention to the election or really aren't involved in politics. Going to a place like Barstool is the perfect place to do that, Jason. And it's just amazing now. We're nearly 100 days, only 100 days until the election, and you have one candidate who is very active in terms of media appearances, and you have another that is sitting in a safe space hoping to run out the clock. And Hillary Clinton tried that in 2016. She didn't have a press conference for nearly 270 days, and we all know how that worked out, Jason.
That's right. And look, President Trump sat down with Chris Wallace and answered the tough questions for an hour. I dare Joe Biden try to be able to do the same. I don't think he could get through it, but he should. He really should, to do the country right. And they ought to have 3 debates also. Gentlemen, Greg and Joe and Allie, Beth, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really do appreciate it.